Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sideline Sato YouTube channel. It has been a while, I'll be honest with you guys, and primarily, really the only reason has been me finishing my undergrad degree, so that has kind of put the YouTube channel on a bit of a pause, but by the time you're seeing this, in your own country or maybe even the States, it's going to be Sunday, November 20th, which means that it will be the first day of the 2022 Qatar World Cup. Boy, do I have a lot to say about that. So, where to start? First things first, this is a World Cup preview, but I'm not going to be super jovial or festive or even really celebrate the World Cup. I decided, you know what, I'll do a preview, I'll do a predictions, but first, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. That elephant is corruption. Yes, corruption, blatant, brazen, and backwards corruption is the reason why this World Cup is happening. For starters, the headline for this World Cup needs to be the fact that anywhere from 6,500 to 13,000 or maybe even more migrant workers have died as a result of the construction of these stadiums. Originally, Qatar promised that these stadiums would be moved afterwards and, these workers would have loans in which they could repay down the line once the construction's done. Unfortunately, neither are the case. The stadiums are staying in Qatar. And the workers, many of which have died, unfortunately, and very tragically. A lot of the living workers, though, aren't really off the hook either. A lot of workers have been put in a position in which they cannot repay their loans that they took out to go to Qatar to work. On top of that, there was many stories regarding the conditions the workers had to go through, not only unsafe working conditions with the heat and the low regulations in Qatar, but also there is the fact that ultimately a lot of these workers were, for lack of a better word, slaves to the Qatari government. And it's just true. Their passports were stolen. They worked 6 days a week. Fridays they were off, but even then they didn't have their passports. They weren't allowed in certain places. They weren't even second-class citizens. They were literally third-class citizens in the eyes of the Qatari government. And to mark this, there's this whole controversy regarding the consumption of alcohol. And it's kind of crazy to me that the banning of alcohol at these stadiums, which in and of itself is just a kind of boneheaded decision considering the consumption of alcohol by football fans globally is ridiculous. A lot of soccer fans drink alcohol. It's a part of the sport. It's a very big part of the sport, so much so that FIFA has an official sponsor for it, Budweiser. Budweiser has been the sponsor for 30, 40 odd years now. Well, to host a World Cup, you need to accept all of FIFA's sponsors. And all of a sudden, you have the Qatari government coming in, and this, I think it's a $75 million or pound annual fee that Budweiser pays towards FIFA to be the sponsor of the World Cup, the sole beer sponsor of the World Cup. And ultimately, you need to represent the sponsors of FIFA. That is a rule for hosting nations. Well, a couple of days before the World Cup started, the Qatari government decided, you know what? Beer just won't be sold at the perimeter of stadiums at all anymore. Only Budweiser Zero, meaning that you have to go to a beer tent several minutes away from the actual stadiums to even purchase it. Well, that is if you are a commoner. If you're just a random fan who really doesn't have a lot of money to their name and is just some regular Joe Schmo, yeah, you can't drink beer for the World Cup. You just cannot consume alcohol for the World Cup in Qatar. It's against their rules, and they're imposing them on you. Unless, of course, you buy a corporate hospitality ticket. Roughly starting at £19,000, you get luxury hotels in which the Qatari government provides you with tons of amenities and tons of hospitality, along with the ability to drink alcohol inside the buildings, as much as you want, actually. So, going back to the fact that corruption started all this, it is quite obvious to see that the Qatari government just doesn't give a damn. They don't give a damn about the fans. They don't give a damn about the workers, many of which have died as a result. They don't give a damn about really anybody else other than trying to bolster their image. And in many ways, the World Cup is a perfect tool to do so. But for FIFA's dismay and the World Cups and Qatar's, this is going to be a PR nightmare. Believe me, it's already started. We saw the Danish journalists get, scurried to the side and told to stop recording. We've seen the actual living conditions that some of these fans who bought tickets and spent thousands of dollars to just get to Qatar are having to be in. I mean, they're literal, they would make Fire Festival tents look like 5-star resorts, legitimately. They're just these plastic shipping containers that are basically see-through. And yeah, ultimately, a lot of the fans who spent a lot of their hard-earned money are in a position where they're in some sort of shipping container, plastic villa that they can't escape from. You went there and now you gotta stay there. And ultimately, there's a lot of discussion around this, around the fact that the Qatari government is in many ways desecrating the sport, in many ways trying to impose their own backwards and ultimately oppressive ideals onto the world of football, and furthermore are just doing so in such a brazen and quite honestly disgusting manner. Because some people will say, well, it's their culture, they don't drink alcohol. Yeah, they don't, and that's fine. But if you're going to limit the fans who can drink alcohol to just the people who are spending the highest dollar, that is just brazenly unacceptable. I mean, it just shows that it's not about their culture. It's about control. It's about money. It's about power. It's about influence. The last thing it's about is culture. Ultimately, this isn't a jab to Qatar, but if you have controversies surrounding the death of workers who constructed your stadium, surrounding your treatment of journalists, your treatment of fans, your living conditions that you provide for these fans who are going to stay in your country during this World Cup, if all of that's happening before the World Cup, even the first ball is kicked, there's a lot that's wrong with that. And it doesn't take a genius to say this. I know I'm stating the obvious, but I'm saying this to illustrate a point. It is a sport that has been ruined by sports washing, by high capital interests, and ultimately has turned into just a billionaire's playground. They just dump money into the investment that they make, which is a football team, and they just reap the benefits. They have this sort of PR boost to themselves. They look like they're helping communities when they start investing through the club, but ultimately the money, the source of the money, is rooted in not only gas, but as many of these worker debts illustrate, blood. So a lot of it is genuinely blood money, built on the backs of people who are less fortunate and less capable to provide for themselves. And seeing all this happen post-COVID, an economy that globally is shrinking and suffering, in which many of the middle-class people across the globe and lower-class people are in a position where they simply just cannot handle it anymore. And in spite of all this, 12 years, 10 years, I think it's 10 years now, but 10 years, maybe a bit more, since Qatar was awarded this, we're finding ourselves in this environment where this so-called opulent nation in Qatar is exercising their right to retain the World Cup, and they're doing so in a miserable fashion, I think. They tried to do this to show everybody just how progressive, accepting, and forward-thinking they are. But in actuality, there is no forward-thinkingness. It is blatant, it is disgusting, and ultimately it goes against everything that the sport stands for. Now, the reason I say this is because Qatar is not even the size of the boot of Italy, has a population around the size of Honolulu, Hawaii, and they deserve to hold the World Cup when there's no football association infrastructure, no recognizable, legitimate league there that gains actual active interest. There's not any sort of precedent. They didn't even have the stadiums, for God's sakes. I mean, think about that. They didn't even have the stadiums when they placed the bid. And ultimately they got it because a lot of the FIFA officials are evil. They're evil, they're corrupt, they're greedy, and that's the reason it's happening. And I've been really thinking about it. And I mean, given that it is halfway across the world, I won't even be able to watch most of these games. So, while it isn't necessarily a form of protest, because just genuinely I'll be asleep or busy doing something else, I do think that there is a lot of discussion to be had surrounding the fact that we need to do something. And I'm not saying to go and, find a illegal website where you can watch these games and stream them without providing any actual TV viewing numbers to the Qatari government or FIFA. But it's out there, I just feel like ultimately, as football fans, we need to do our best to watch as little of it as possible. I mean, they shouldn't have hosted it from the jump. I mean, even French president, or former prime minister rather, not president, Sarkozy, he was highly involved in the bribing from Qatari officials to the French government. The Qatari government bought tons of Airbuses from France, and then the Qataris bought PSG, Sarkozy's favorite team. So ultimately, there is a lot to this. I could sit here all day and just list off all the human rights violations, blatant atrocities committed, and genuinely underhanded, evil, and backhanded business dealings. It is foul. And I think if you're a fan of the sport remaining as genuine, authentic, and, for lack of a better term, real as possible, it's in your best interest to avoid watching as many games on any sort of broadcast that will generate some sort of revenue for FIFA and Qatar. I mean, already they've invested more money into this World Cup than anybody has ever. It is staggering. And I just ultimately think that something bad will happen. I mean, it's just inevitable. Seeing everything set up the way it is, heat is still extremely high over there, even though they moved it to the winter, this World Cup. But ultimately, there is a lot of answering that needs to be done. And after this, I think every nation in the world should look at any sort of official that was involved in corruption, was involved in bribery, and they just need to be handled. They need to be imprisoned. They need to face the consequences of their actions, because ultimately, the fact that we're even discussing how many thousand individuals had to die as a result of the construction of these stadiums is just disgusting in and of itself. I don't know really what else to say other than I'm praying on the Qataris' downfall this World Cup. I hope you guys get dumped in the group stage, and I hope you guys have to spitefully host the rest of the World Cup. And for the sake of the fans there, I hope nothing actually bad happens. I hope that everybody does stay safe and that there isn't any outrageous controversy. But considering that every day leading up to this World Cup for the last week has had outrageous consequences and outrageous controversies occurring, I think that it is just inevitable that something bad will happen, as much as I hope it doesn't. But since this is a sports channel, we'll just get into my quick predictions for each group stage and who's going to win the whole damn thing, and ultimately top scorer maybe, and a dark horse or two. So I have my phone here, and I have my World Cup predictions in front of me. So I'll just read them off, kind of quick fire, give a quick explanation as to what I'm thinking for each group, each decision, each pick I make, and we'll move forward. Also, before I get into this, I do think that it is worth noting that a very prominent London-based Middle Eastern journalist had reported yesterday that the Ecuadorian national team was approached by the Qatari government, the Qatari Football Association, to accept bribes totaling around 7.3 million. I think 8 players were noted, and there was some corroboration on behalf of some internal officials on both sides that this bribe did go through for Qatar to beat Ecuador 1-0 and for Ecuador to throw the game. I really hope it's not the case. I really, really hope, because that would just be, it would be a dark stain on the sport, and it would just cause a lot of damage to the image of the sport. Ultimately, the fact that a lot of betting sites have already pulled that game due to concerns of match fixing is just despicable. It literally spits in the face of the sport and shows that they're not actually interested in the sport. They're interested in the maintenance of their own self-image. So, with all that ranting out the way, let's get into my predictions. And Group A is Ecuador, Netherlands, Qatar, and Senegal. And I'm going to say that in this group, Netherlands will finish first. Shout out Ruud Gullit, shout out Virgil van Dijk. And we'll see Senegal go through into the second round as well, or into the knockouts, rather. England, USA, Iran, and Wales is Group B. I have a feeling that England and USA are going to be first and second, respectively. I think Iran is going to be a very difficult team to face. And ultimately, I think Wales just won't be at that quality. I know they had a really good run at the Euros last time round, but I just don't see it happening this time. Sorry. But Group C is Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. And in this one, I think it's going to be Argentina and Mexico in first and second. I think Poland will just miss out, and Saudi Arabia is just going to be a bunch of whipping boys. For the rest of the group, they're really not going to stand a chance. Group D is where my predictions start to get a little interesting, I'd say. The group is Australia, Denmark, France, and Tunisia. And I think that it's going to be Denmark in first and France in second. Ultimately, Denmark has beaten France twice since the last Euros, and even though I don't think that their squad is particularly fantastic, I still think Denmark has some decent players in there who have a lot of heart, a lot of grit, and are going to play their hearts out, and ultimately snag a win against France. And France will pick up wins against Australia and Denmark, Tunisia rather, as well. But I do think that it will be a little tricky for this to go off without a hitch for France. I think that they're going to suffer the curse of the post-World Cup win World Cup, because it's been quite a trend for them over the last several decades. Group E is Costa Rica, Germany, Japan, and Spain. And I think this group will have Germany in first, Spain in second, Japan just behind Spain. I think Japan will be a very interesting team at the World Cup. I don't see them making it out of the group stages, but I think a lot of their players, from Takumi Minamino to Mitoma to Tomiyasu, I think they're all really class and could really kind of shine at this World Cup and play some really interesting football. But I just don't see them winning against either Germany or Spain. So I just feel like they're going to have a good effort, but it won't be good enough, unfortunately. Group F is Belgium, Canada, Croatia, and Morocco. And I'm sorry, my Canadian neighbors, but I think you guys are going to get rock bottom in this group. I think we'll see Morocco in third, and Croatia will be in second, with Belgium topping the group. Group G is Brazil, Cameroon, Serbia, and Switzerland. The final match day sees Serbia and Switzerland face off, and considering that they're both probably going to be on equal footing, at least I would hearken a guess that they will be. I think that's going to be a really intense game. It's going to be really high octane, and I think maybe a few people on both sides will get severely injured. But in Group G, I think Brazil tops the group naturally. I think Serbia ends up beating Switzerland. I feel like some of those core players for Switzerland have aged just a bit too much. Granit Xhaka, Xherdan Shaqiri, Jan Sommer. They're still quality players. They have a Kanji, a few other guys, but I just feel like the likes of Kostic, Vlahovic, some of the other players for Serbia, some of the other rotational pieces, I think that they're going to be really difficult to play against. They have Mitrovic too. I mean, Vlahovic, Mitrovic up top with Tadic and Kostic on the wings is going to be quite scary to see if that's how they end up lining up. But either way, if they don't, I still think Serbia is second in that group. So Group H is Ghana, Portugal, South Korea, and Uruguay. And for this group, I think we'll see Portugal top it, and I think we'll see Uruguay come in second, which I think this group is probably one of the more entertaining groups. I mean, obviously you have Ghana and Uruguay facing a lot of bad blood between those nations since the 2012 or 2010 World Cup, my apologies. And I think it'll be a really entertaining game. I think there's going to be some real gems in there. And I think South Korea could potentially be a better team. But I just don't see them making out of the group stage. I don't know what Son's condition is. I know he had that orbital fracture recently. But even with Son, I don't see them really beating Uruguay or Portugal. So, on to the knockouts. And my first knockout would be Netherlands versus the U.S. I'm an American, and as much as I would love to see the U.S. beat the Netherlands, I don't see it happening. I'm sorry. I mean, the likes of Virgil van Dijk, Frank de Jong, Memphis Depay, the list goes on and on. It's really boys against men, the U.S. versus Netherlands. So I think Netherlands will skate past the U.S. in that game very, very comfortably. And then the other game would be England versus Senegal. Sadio Mane is officially ruled out for the whole World Cup, undergoing a 3-month surgery, or surgery that'll keep him out for 3 months, rather. I predicted Senegal to get through their group, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to go past England. There's no chance that they end up beating England without Mane. I think they'll have just enough resilience in their back line and in goal to make it out of the group, but I think the first round of knockouts is going to be the end of the road for Senegal. So then we go to Argentina versus France, which would be quite the first knockout to see. It would be quite a matchup in that round. And honestly, I think Argentina wins it. I think Messi is super focused for this World Cup. And realistically, I know there's a lot of quality in that French side, but I don't think France really has it in them to beat Argentina this year. I think Argentina's going to have a different gravy this time around. I mean, they did make it to a World Cup final 8 years ago against Germany, so I think they're gonna stomp France actually, and it'll be quite an interesting and entertaining game. But then Mexico versus Denmark, I think I'm gonna have to give it to Denmark. Ultimately, Mexico has this curse of the fifth game that they experience at just about every World Cup, where they make it out of the group stage, but they can't make it past that first round of knockouts. I think it'll happen again. I think Denmark will hold their own. I think it'll be a very feisty affair. But my prediction is that Denmark ends up beating Mexico. And then we have Germany versus Croatia. And that is going to be quite a game. But I will have to say, I'm sorry, my Croatian brothers and sisters, but I think Germany has it. And I don't think you should take too much offense to that. Germany is a really good side, and I think they'll comfortably handle Croatia. Much in the way that I think that Spain will also comfortably handle Belgium. I know Thibaut Courtois is there. I know De Bruyne is there. But quite frankly, the fact that Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen are still being called up to the Belgium national team tells you all you need to know about their defense. I mean, they have Wout Faes there. And sure, he didn't, really concede too many goals in the last 5 or 6 games in the Prem, but I don't really rate the Belgian back line, and I think Spain will end up narrowly eking out a win there. Then we have Brazil versus Uruguay and Portugal versus Serbia. So Portugal versus Serbia, I think it goes without saying, I think Portugal win. Ultimately, they have one of the best teams on paper this time around, Portugal. I think it'd be difficult for Serbia to pull off an upset. So I have Portugal in that one. And then Brazil versus Uruguay. Uruguay is quite decent this time around. I think they're actually a dark horse for this tournament in many ways. I am a Liverpool fan, so I rate Darwin. So that's kind of what you need to know about their attack. But, the likes of Federico Valverde, Rodrigo Bentancur, you have Jose Maria Jimenez, Sebastian Coates in defense. I think they got a really interesting squad there. And there are some noticeable gaps in the squad, but it's the World Cup. A random player could just pop off for them. But Brazil, I think, is on paper arguably like a top 3 national team this time around. So it's tough for me to say just because I have a feeling that Uruguay is going to be a dark horse this time around. But I'm going to give it to Brazil. So the Netherlands will be England. I think that Argentina will beat Denmark. I think that Germany will beat Spain. And I think that Portugal will beat Brazil. Which leaves us with semis of Portugal, Germany, and Argentina, Netherlands. Ultimately, I think Portugal beats Germany. I believe Argentina will beat Netherlands. And I think we'll see ourselves facing the prospect of a Messi-Ronaldo Argentina-Portugal final. Third place, I think Netherlands would beat Germany, just narrowly. And I think in the final, Argentina will beat Portugal. For Messi to win his first and only World Cup, then honestly, I could just see the man retiring there. Maybe he rides out the rest of his PSG season, with a rejuvenated focus for the game, rejuvenated appreciation for the game. But yeah, I think Argentina is going to win it. If that is really something that you wanted to know. Top scorer, I'm going to say Messi. I think it's just kind of obvious. I mean, they're facing Saudi Arabia. If Messi plays in that game, he'll probably net a couple. Goalie of the tournament usually goes to a guy who's who goes far. So I'm going to say maybe Emiliano Martinez. I think he'll probably be the starting goalie for Argentina, and I think he'll just make a lot of really good saves. He really balls out for them whenever he plays. And some dark horses, I think the Netherlands is a dark horse to keep an eye out on. I think Uruguay is a dark horse to keep an eye out on. And I'm going to say Denmark. Only because I feel like that Denmark team is one of the few teams who, on paper, really aren't that great. But when you see how they tie all their pieces together, I think they're really fantastic sometimes. At least the football that they play is really pretty, and I think could yield them some good results this World Cup. I don't think they'll win it, obviously, but I could see them going a little further than some people expect. So those are my three dark horses: Netherlands, Denmark, and who's the last one that I just said? Uruguay. So Netherlands, Denmark, Uruguay. Dark horses: Messi top scorer, Argentina to win the World Cup, the final against Portugal, Messi beats Ronaldo. And yeah, I mean, I really don't have much else to say. As you know, I'm very conflicted about this, and I'm probably going to keep my viewing to a minimum. Only really watching re-uploaded highlights on Reddit and maybe catching a live stream here and there, but I'm probably going to watch the final too, for sure, but that's about it, really. I mean, with 130 or 120 billion spent by the Qatari government to run this thing, I hope they suffer tremendous financial loss as a result, because, I mean, it really goes without stating that the way that this World Cup was determined to be hosted, the way that the workers were treated, and ultimately just the arrogance of Qatar that they could just host this and ultimately kind of bend everybody to their rules is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's literally the biggest global event. Every year it happens. It's the biggest sporting event every time it happens. And it is a tool for a lot of nations to kind of brighten their image and be in good graces for the rest of the world. I mean, you could even look at Russia. I mean, Russia back then when they hosted in 2018, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Russia at the time. But even then, like, people kind of, they made do with it. They didn't really kick up too much of a fuss. There wasn't as many controversies as this World Cup even, and I mean, this one hasn't even started. So I think it is a very sad World Cup in many ways. I mean, we're hosting it in the middle of the winter. It doesn't feel the same. And I really and sincerely hope that the corrupt crooks at FIFA and the corrupt financiers of this World Cup and other corrupt financiers in sports can just really come to grips. And I hope that there is a proper outcry against this. I mean, it's 12 years, 10 years too late to really make any difference. It's happening now, unfortunately. And there really isn't there isn't a lot that we can do. I mean, you could really, just not watch the games. You could just follow the results. But obviously for many people, football is genuinely bigger than most things in their life. And it just saddens me that the rest of the world is subjugated to have to watch this World Cup in one of the most vile and repressive countries in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say other than, if you're going to watch, do not watch on an illegal site because you're going to be straight up disrespecting the Qatari government, man. I mean, hey, they spent a lot of money on this. They spent a whole lot of money on this. So you better watch your back, mister, because, hey, they need that money. They need all that ad revenue. Because, I mean, hey, Budweiser, they spent $75 million and that just went down the drain because that's not being advertised anywhere anymore, effectively. So, yeah, I mean, it's complicated, it's convoluted, it's just honestly a little depressing, this World Cup. And I hope the match fixing rumor is just that. I hope it's a rumor. They've already done such a horrible job running it that if they're actively trying to match fix, I think that any and every player who is at a team that's going to face them should just decline and just smash them to bits, because that's not how the sport is supposed to work. And if there is blatant match fixing, I mean, hey, realistically, the only thing that can be done is to retroactively ban Qatar from ever hosting another FIFA event again, because you can't match fix. You straight up cannot match fix. That is the one thing in sports. Can't bet, can't match fix. Obviously, other things have occurred in sports like alcohol sponsors, gambling sponsors, this, that. None of those are necessarily even morally great. But it's just so, it spits in the face of the very sport that they're trying to host when they attempt to match fix a game. So if it does come out in the coming weeks, months, days, however long, that yes, they are actively bribing players to take losses, I really don't know what else to say other than you should just cancel the thing. Like, just cancel it. Straight up, just cancel it. Don't even have it anymore. I know they spent a lot of money, but they're not even properly accrediting your sponsors. So I wish FIFA would have any semblance of a backbone for once, other than one that is made out of straight cash and coins. But it is FIFA we're talking about. Genuinely the most corrupt organization on the planet. So I wouldn't hold my breath.